The biggest three things that advisors need to have is what I call the three C's. They have to have competence, they have to have confidence, and they have to have courage. And competence comes first because it's hard to have confidence if you're not competent. So you got to have competence. That's where the practice comes in, sharpening the blade on your saw. You got to be really competent. The more competent you are, the more confident you get. And then when you're super confident, you got a lot of confidence, you typically have a lot of courage. That's the formula right there. So and a lot of that is in your head. So mindset, I already talked about one, your environment. Choose who you hang out with. Only influx positive things into your brain. Be around people who bring you up. Don't be around people who pull you down. You think you're a big thinker? Get out of your pond and go to the ocean.
You're listening to The Uncertainty Edge, the show about the art and science of moving forward when the path isn't clear. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan. Each episode, I sit down with leaders, advisors, and thinkers to explore how they navigate uncertainty, make better decisions, and stay focused in a world that rarely cooperates. Together, we'll look for the clarity hidden inside uncertainty. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Sivarajan, and welcome to this episode of the Uncertainty Edge podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jim Effner, President and CEO of P2P Group and author of Bridge Your Gap. Jim brings over 30 years of financial services experience, having built one of Northwestern Mutual's largest offices with over 100 full-time advisors, managing nearly $27 billion in insurance coverage. As a lifetime $1 million roundtable qualifier and 3-time forum qualifier, Jim has walked in your shoes, both as a top producing advisor and as a leader who developed hundreds of others to achieve extraordinary results. Now, through P2P Group, he's dedicated to helping financial professionals bridge the gap between the potential and their performance. Get ready for actionable insights on sales mastery, leadership, and building a practice that stands the test of time. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. I'm honored to be here. I look forward to it.
Likewise, I think this will be a very fun conversation based on our initial conversation.
Same.
So, Jim, you've had a very interesting journey from starting as a campus recruit at Northwestern Mutual to building one of their largest offices in the country. Can you take us back to those early days? What drove your initial success to becoming Rookie of the Year? And how did you sustain that momentum over 3 decades?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm honored to answer that, but I do have to say, it makes me feel old. I got to go all the way back to 1989.
We're all old.
We're dating ourselves here, Sam, but I'm honored to tell the story. Most people don't care enough to ask. So I would say that my rookie year, I had turned 22 years old 6 days before I started. I grew up in a middle-class family. Neither one of my mom or dad had a college degree, and I had never had a professional job before, and I caddied and I painted houses. And I went to college. I got a degree in corporate finance, and I interviewed, quite honestly, with insurance companies to get practice. I didn't know what it was like to put a suit on and interview. I didn't have any dreams of going into this industry. But when I started interviewing, I started feeling the blood rush through my veins like there was no tomorrow. And the whole reason being is I realized that my future, my potential, my income was all up to me. That I was not subjected to anybody else dictating or telling me what I was worth or who to work with or whatever. That I could, the world was my oyster. I could make what I wanted to make out of it. I was driven by that. At that time, I was a former athlete. I'm competitive. I'm disciplined. And so, into the business I came totally naive. And I started in the business. And what got me to Rookie of the Year in the first part of your question was, I would say, my competitive drive. It was a big deal in the firm that I joined. It was a big deal in the company that I joined to be recognized as the Rookie of the Year, to be put on stage. And I wanted to, so to speak, win the game. I was 22 years old. I was young. I was hungry. I had that first year I didn't have a wife. I didn't have any kids. I worked. And I had no problems whatsoever putting in 70, 75 hours a week. and doing whatever it took to be rookie of the year and following it and following it and following it. And so I remember I put in my bedroom door a big poster board that I bought at Office Depot. And from the left bottom corner to the right top corner, I put MDRT. And from the left top corner to the bottom right corner, I put rookie of the year. And every day when I went to bed, I walked through that door and I looked at those two things, and it just reinforced my first two professional goals ever. And I was very proud at the end of the year to have achieved both of them. Qualify for MDRT, which is the top 6% of the industry at 22 years old, and also earned the rookie of the year. There was also some financial drive. One of the things I did as a kid was caddy, and I caddied at a very exclusive country club and exposed to things. And when you're walking around with some affluent individual, businessman, doctor, whatever, and you're listening to the conversations, I was privy to conversations that I was never privy to hanging out with my dad. And I love my dad, but he just wasn't in that category.
Right.
So I thought to myself, man, I want this lifestyle. I want to join a club. I want somebody to carry my clubs. I want this. And so it was something that I learned at a very young age. Like, I wanted to lead a big lifestyle. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to have any constraints on money. And if I wanted to go out to the nicest restaurants, I wanted to go out. I didn't care that I was 22 and I shouldn't be doing it. In today's dollars, I think I was getting $500 dinners 3 nights a week with, at that time, my fiance, and I wanted to. So I had to work to provide the lifestyle that I really wanted to be accustomed to. Was half of it. And the other half of it was my drive, my competitiveness, my ego to, kind of win the game in my first year. So that's what got me at that year way back when. What kept me is it evolved. That was 22. Today I'm 58. As you age, you get more wisdom, you get more life experience, you get more clarity on the meaning and the purpose of life. And, chasing materialistic things was way more important to me at 22 than it is at, forget 58, 48. So I think what really was able for me to evolve, to keep my focus, to take my drive, to then have 11 more awesome years after my rookie year as a rep, and then have almost 15 years as a managing partner, and now do what I do now, is to be able to focus on the mentality of being the best I can be and learning how to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. I mean, I learned from a mentor a long time ago, you're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. And I always want to be green and growing. Even when I'm 85, God willing, 90, I want to be learning. I want to be growing. I want to be challenged. I want to get out of bed and be running towards something. And one of my biggest, believe it or not, you'll laugh at this, it's a lot of Americans' dreams. One of my biggest fears is retirement. Where does that come from? It's like, I don't know what I would do. I'm at the point now financially where I could retire, but I need to have a purpose when I put my feet on the ground and get out of bed. I need to have something to chase after. I like the hunt. I like to be challenged. And because of that, that has made me successful in all the different things that I've done. And I think that there's probably a few different answers I could give to that question, but that's the one that probably resonates the most.
Well, there's some great nuggets in there, Jim. You're absolutely right. And many audience members can relate to that feeling when you're 22 of that competitive drive that is pushing you to put the hours in, to set high goals and to achieve. But they can also relate to what you're talking about, that evolution over time, right? That your goals or the hunger changes in some ways, but that's not necessarily in bad ways. You just need to figure out what is it that is going to keep you motivated, to keep you at the top of your game, to continue to evolve, as you put it. And that's very, very powerful. And you've identified some of the key factors at play that most professionals find themselves dealing with to harness that drive effectively, that competitiveness in a productive way early on in their career, and to keep that hunger alive, to learn, to grow, to contribute as you get married, as you have kids, as you've achieved that level of financial freedom that you've talked about. And I really love that turn of phrase that you said, that you're either green or growing or ripe and rotting. I'm going to steal that. And you're right. I see that with myself, that the same kind of aspirations that you talked about, that many talk about, oh, retiring. I might have had that maybe 20, 30 years ago. And I sit there and think, well, what does that exactly mean? Like, I have no desire to hang up the shingle and go lie on a beach for the rest of my life somewhere. 1 or 2 weeks at a time is great, but there has to be a purpose. There has to be something. There has to be some degree of growing, whatever age that you're at. So that's great.
No question. And I would also add to that having a purpose, being the best I could be, having something to achieve, having something to chase, all that stuff. But the other thing too is I've really learned throughout my life what's really, really, really important to me. And it's changed. And now it's really boils down, and I'm very crystal clear on it, to one word, and that is impact. And I think I get the most perspective on it by reeling forward the clock to, call it 85, and being on my deathbed and asking myself, why did God put me here? What was my purpose? What did I do? Did I leave the world a better place? And I think I have a very unique, I'm not good at a lot of things, but I'm really good at what I do here now. And it's been able to have a huge amount of impact in a very positive way on a lot of financial advisors. And that's helped them have better families, have better lifestyles, have better serenity, have more financial security. And because I had a small bit to do with their journey. And that's way more meaningful when I'm 85 than my net worth or the house I live in or the cars
100%.
I drive or my golf handicap. I want to change people's lives. I want to be let in, and I want to have an impact on them. And this is my way of doing that.
Good for you. In your book, Bridge Your Gap, you talk about the gap between potential and performance that every financial advisor faces. I mean, let's face it, every professional faces. From your experience working with the hundreds of advisors, what are the most common factors that you've identified that prevent talented professionals from reaching their full potential?
I'm going to answer that, but let me take one step back before I answer that directly. What is the gap? Right. And like you coined it, it's the difference between their potential and their performance. But more specifically, is that what I've experienced in 36 years of this industry is there's an amazing amount, the majority, a vast amount of mediocre financial reps at best. And the best of the best are like 5%. And they are very different than the rest. And they lead a wildly abundant life. And unlimited and all that kind of stuff, but it's the same industry, it's the same products, most of which the advisors are in the same communities, and yet there's a huge gap between those two. So that's what I'm talking about, is the gap. So now your question is, what are the things I've seen that are in the way, right? Well, first and foremost, and there's not a close second, is their headspace, the stuff that goes in between the 6 inches in between their ears. The ones that wallow in mediocrity, or even worse than that, have a low self-confidence. They have some self-doubt. They don't feel strongly that they deserve more. They don't feel that they're worthy of more. They don't have a compelling vision, and they don't have the confidence that they have the skill set. They're in their own way. But when I'm in as a third party outsider, I know they do, but they got years of baggage. They got years of self-defeated thinking, most of which is subconscious, not conscious. So I think the biggest thing is their headspace. The second thing I would say is their environment. I am not bright enough, smart enough, good enough to be where I am today on my own. I'm a factor of those that have impacted me, that have lifted me up, that have taught me, that have mentored me, that have coached me. And I have been very, 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 very blessed by the environments that I got in. The first of which at 22, right out of college, was blind luck. I mean, blind luck. And it was the Northwestern Mutual, which is the creme de la creme of the life insurance industry. But then not only that, it was the number one agency in the entire company that I joined. And so it was the best of the best. And that's like, if you go to sports, use any sport, I'll just say football, you're going to perform a lot better at Alabama or Ohio State than you're going to perform, same athlete, at a local community college because of the environment that you're in. And so I think the other thing that holds people back is they're not in a very good environment. You tell them they get into one of my workshops and I start talking about the possibilities, and you can see them kind of light up. But then right after that, they're like, but I've never seen anybody do that. I don't know. Is that real? Is Jim making that up? Like, are there advisors that really make $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million a year? I've never met one. There's nobody in their firm doing it. There's nobody in their company doing it. They've never seen it. So I think that really holds people back. They just don't know what they don't know. So I think that's a big thing that gets in their way. And then last but not least, for whatever reason, advisors do not embrace their profession like a lot of other professionals do, i.e. a surgeon, a professional athlete, where they're constantly working on their craft. They're practicing, they're working on getting better. For the most part, financial advisors learn in a year to 18, at most 24 months, how to do the various aspects of their business. And then for the rest of their career, they just wing it.
Yep.
They don't work on their craft. They don't sit there and practice and try to get better and seek how to sharpen the blade. And so at the end of the day, I think their competencies aren't anywhere as good as they could be if they were more dedicated to seeking out how to sharpen their blade and committed to practicing to get there. And so those would be the top three reasons, I would say.
I think it's very powerful. And there's a lot to unpack there, but let me go through them. The last one that you talked about, that is so right. It's a craft. What we do is a craft. And like any craftsman or craftswoman, we have to continue to work at the craft to get better at it. There's always new tools, new techniques, new kind of tweaks that you can make. And I think to your point, anyone that treats this as something that you've learned 30 years ago in your rookie year and you've learned everything that you need to learn, etc., you don't need to learn anymore, I think is asking for mediocre outcomes because things have changed, right? You're absolutely right. Your core training that you've got in your formative years is going to be the bulk of what you are going to rely on. But anybody that feels that they don't have anything more to learn or anything more to practice, etc., I think that is doing themselves and the industry and their clients a disservice. But the other things that you mentioned, I want to explore that a little bit because I agree with you 100%. Mindset, I think, is huge in anything, but certainly in this area. Is this something that you're born with? How do you get a better mind space, if you will? And the other element that you talk about, environment, to some extent, you've mentioned it yourself, that's luck. And it seems that, yeah, we can, and you're humble enough to attribute a lot of your success to luck, etc. I think, how do you create luck? I guess if you are somebody that's listening to this, etc., luck seems to be something that you either have good luck or that you have bad luck. It's not something that is in your control.
Well, you asked like three very significant things there. Let me start with the last one, the luck. To be clear, there's definitely points I got lucky after I started, but where I started at 22 years old was pure luck, nothing other than luck. After that, I feel like, yeah, I had some luck here and there throughout that journey, but I also created my path, created my environment with a lot of intentionality. And I think reps can do that as well. And the environment that you're in, the saying that my grandparents used to say that's forever been around, you are who you are based on the people you hang out with and the books you read. But with more technology, that could be paraphrased today, that you are who you are based on your environment. Your environment is your people you hang out with, friends, business contacts, where you go to work and all that kind of stuff, where you live, the neighborhood you live in, what goes into your brain are books you read, but also like you, Sam, people like you, podcasts you listen to, stuff you expose your brain to, but there's a lot that goes into your environment. And so I teach with my reps who come through my workshop, pay attention to your environment. Because what happens is most human nature is to survive to a point where you're comfortable and then settle after that. And that's the typical path of financial advisors. All research has been done in our industry. It's somewhere between 5 and 7 years, which is really sad that a financial advisor grows in their top line revenue, or I should say their bottom line revenue, by 4 to 4.5% per year the rest of their career. Once they get to the 5 to 7 year mark, they just plateau. Why? Because they settle. They get to the point, they don't do it consciously, but they're not scared about, can I pay my bills? I might have to foreclose on my home. By then They got a little revenue coming in. So they get comfortable, they sell. So an environment constantly forces you to raise your game. So for example, when I was 31 years old, I moved into a private gated country club community. I bought a house that was the most I could possibly buy based on what a bank would lend me. I was the youngest kid in the neighborhood by far, joined the country club. So now I'm 31 years old and I'm playing golf and weekend outings and stuff like that with people that are 45, 50 that are investment bankers, surgeons, and companies. And guess what? My kids are in the same school system as their kids. I'm getting invited to their party. Suddenly I'm hanging out with people that it's like, I got an ego. I want to be at their level. I'm not going to be the chump on the block. So I got to raise my game. If I'm going to do, and then they start inviting me on vacations, and you don't want to say, well, I can't afford that. So it's like, I got to step up my game. If I'm going to hang with this crowd, I got to step up my game. And then in your business as well, you go from no staff to 1 staff to 3 staff to 5 staff. So your business expenses grow. You expand the physical location you're in, all those sorts of things, so that the revenue that you have to develop to keep your head above the water, it's not foolish, it's smart, but it constantly makes you be on your toes. You can't just rest on your laurels and be lazy and settle. And so environment's a big deal, and you got to have the courage and the risk appetite to constantly be raising that bar. So that would be something that I would say would be significant, important mindset. You asked me, I mean, Sam, if I had the answer, I'd be a billionaire 5 times over. How do you work on mindset? I can't tell you how many times people have come to my workshop and say, Jim, your biggest gift is your mindset. You are so confident. You are so convicted. You are so passionate. I want that. How do I get that? And if I said, just do this, I'd be a billionaire, right? I have my opinions, but let's just say it's not easy. It doesn't come, that answer doesn't come in a jar that you just open up after I tell you what to do. And you're like, oh, thank you. And 6 months later, you have the mind. It's a complicated thing. And there's been books written for centuries on mindset. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill and Simon Sinek and Begin with the Why and Earl Nightingale, The Secret, and on and on and on and on and on. But here's what I could tell you. The biggest 3 things, this is just confirming how important mindset is. It's not really answering your question about how do you get it, but I do have opinions on that as well. But the biggest 3 things that advisors need to have is what I call the 3 C's. They have to have competence, they have to have confidence, and they have to have courage. And competence comes first because it's hard to have confidence if you're not competent. So you got to have competence. That's where the practice comes in, sharpening the blade on your saw. You got to be really competent. The more competent you are, the more confident you get. And then when you're super competent, you got a lot of confidence, you typically have a lot of courage. That's the formula right there. So that, and a lot of that is in your head. So mindset, I already talked about 1, your environment. Choose who you hang out with. Only influx positive things into your brain. Be around people who bring you up. Don't be around people who pull you down. You think you're a big thinker? Get out of your pond and go to the ocean. Make you the smallest thinker and then work on becoming that over time. But it is infusing yourself with morning readings, morning podcasts. Your mind is a powerful thing, and your mindset is very powerful, and you can influence it. I do not believe you're born with it. I really don't. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. None of my siblings have remotely close to the same mindset I have professionally or the drive I have. And we were raised in the same house with the same parents. So and neither of my parents did either. So it is, it's learned, and it's what goes into your head over long periods of time between people, between experiences, between environments, between those sorts of things. And you can have a plan to build your mindset. And yeah, I'll just stop there.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like that that plan has to do with, if I understand you correctly, intentional effort, right? So everything from competence, sharpening your saw, learning the tools, continuing to improve your game, that's intentional effort. Confidence that you gain from putting those skills and experiences to work, that's intentional effort. And then the courage that comes in is, again, partly it's a function of those other 2, but you're then also seeking new environments, new opportunities, new kind of instances where you're kind of putting yourself out there, out of your comfort zone. Again, that's all intentional effort. Is that a fair way of putting it?
It is, but then let me put the whammy on top. It's the fourth C. So if I was sitting with you on a piece of paper, I would draw out that competence, confidence, and courage. And then I would put like a wrapper on the top with the biggest C, and that is conviction. And the reality of it is that our beliefs drive our behaviors. One, I try to take a lot of intentional effort to really be in tune consciously of what do I believe. And I get really convicted on it. Sometimes, just like all of your greatest assets and skills can also be a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken psychological tests and profiles. One of the things that'll profile me as, which is a positive, but is also a weakness, is Jim Effner views an opinion of his as an absolute fact. It's not an opinion to Jim. It's a fact. It is what it is. How can anybody debate me? Even though when really it's my opinion, I view it as a fact because I'm deeply convicted in what I do. So conviction is a big deal. And conviction also contributes to those things. The biggest one is probably courage. So yeah, conviction's a big deal.
Makes sense. Now, Jim, we've all observed a fundamental shift in the industry from what I would describe as the rigorous sales training programs of yesteryear for traditional life insurance companies to today's more fragmented approach. With the blending of wealth management and insurance practices, what critical training elements do you think have been lost? And how does this impact advisor development from everything that we've just talked about, courage, competence, confidence, and conviction?
I laugh because I told you earlier when we got started, I'm 58. So when I talk to a bunch of my friends and peers that are in their 50s, we all have a very adamant, strong opinion about the answer to the question that you just asked, right? Back in the day when we started, we did this and it's all gone now and it's going to destroy the industry.
Right.
And I think to a certain extent, you got to be careful with that because I think every generation does that. I remember listening to my grandparents say, well, when we were raised, we didn't do what your father does. And then I heard my dad say, well, when I was raised, we didn't do it. And now here I am saying, well, when I started, so I think you got to be careful of that. But there are some fundamental things that are real that are not just generational opinions, right? And that is the fact that first and foremost, there is back in the 80s, he said IBM was the captain, though, but it was a proud career to be in sales. And a dream sales job in the 70s and 80s was IBM. And they wore the blue suits with the white shirts and the ties. And I mean, it was a hard job to get, and they made really good money. And it was a proud, as a parent, your son or daughter gets a sales job at IBM. You're like, yeah, they made it, Now it's evolved to sales has got a very negative connotation. Nobody wants to use the word sales. So it really bugs me. So when I'm working with young financial advisors, if I say the word sales, they'll be like, oh, don't say that. I don't want to sell anybody. I'm an advisor. I do a consultative approach. I don't sell anybody BS. Sales is life and all business is driven by sales. And when you're ethical and you're honest and you care and you take the time to seek to understand and then you persuade people to make actions and decisions that are in their best interest, you should never, ever, ever, ever apologize for selling. People need to be sold. They need to be sold. So anyways, my point is, first and foremost, what's missing in that rigorous sales training that I have in 1989 is this stigma that people want to get away from sales, don't want to be salesmen or saleswomen. So at the top of the list, I think that's a problem. That's a big problem. Also, with the integration of investments, there was a very clear, distinctive line in the 80s and up till the mid to late 90s that you were like a stockbroker or a financial advisor, or you were a life insurance agent. Now they bleed together. Now everybody does everything, right? And so that advisor title, as opposed to agent, life insurance agent has a sales connotation. Financial advisor has more of a consultative connotation. And so I really feel that they have gotten away from selling anybody anything and only doing what their clients want to do. So for example, I'll give you a real example that I see all the time is I'm an advisor. Let's say I'm managing an individual who's got $3 million for me to manage. And I'm making, 50, 60, 75 basis points off managing that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have a bunch of feel good conversations, bunch of niceties with him and his wife when I'm meeting with them and we're doing our reviews. I'm taking my fiscal, fiduciary responsibility and I'm helping him make money. I'm helping him manage his money. I'm answering all his questions. And then that feels good. But the individual needs to do some estate planning. They need to buy some life insurance to close all the loopholes in their plan. Now, if I switch to having a life insurance conversation with you and you don't like life insurance and you don't want to hear it, my fear as an advisor is you're going to be pissed off. You're going to feel as if I'm trying to sell you something because I'm
Right.
going to commission that you don't need because you have plenty of money. And now I'm going to walk away and take my 3 million. You're going to take the 3 million. I'm going to lose that revenue. So there's a lot of financial advisors that are making annual advisory fees that don't want to disrupt the boat. They don't want to challenge their clients. They don't want to enter into courageous conversations. They don't go to telling them what they need to hear. They only focus on telling them what they want to hear so that they won't take their money and go somewhere else. As an advisor, to be good, you got to lead people. You got to lead people. And every now and then you got to disturb them. You got to challenge them. And back in the day when we started, that's how we were taught. And that's how we're wired. And today's advisors, God forbid they ever turn into that potential sales role and get perceived like that. So that, and then last but not least, which is why I'm so busy at P2P, Sam, is there really is no more sales training. It's unbelievable for me to go to companies that are 100 plus years old, that are 2, 3, $400 billion companies, that when I go in an interview and say, how are your new advisors trained sales wise? Well, they get trained by the local office they start in, by their mentor, and every office is different. There's no national training program anymore in almost any company, or if there is, nobody in the field uses it.
Now, is that because this move away from this sales mindset that you talked about? Nobody wants to be labeled sales, or is it something else that's happening in the industry that there is no national kind of sales training programs? Or very limited, let's say?
It's a great question. I could talk a long time about that because that's not what I do for a living. So my answer might be slightly biased, but once again, I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's a fact. And that's the fact that the reality of it is, if you think about who is going to be really good at teaching you how to be awesome, master at your craft in selling in the financial advisory business, somebody else who knows how to do it, and somebody else who's been there and done that. And so in the industry, in that space, if you're a really good advisor and you're making 7 figures, 8 figures, and you're super successful and you are a master of your craft, you're not going to leave that practice to go start a consulting business or a sales training business to teach those skills to others. Your life is too fruitful. So therefore, what's replaced that is a lot of corporate home office employees that have an educational or a training background that make a stab at putting together the ins and outs of the sales training program, but they themselves have never sold a single thing in their life. And there is an art to selling. There is an art to that really, it can't be taught out of a textbook. And it can only be taught by people that understand and have mastered the art themselves. And those people are hard to get in training. And one of the things that, this isn't to boast my company, but just a fact is that one of the things that really works in our workshops is that I bring a tremendous amount of credibility, because when advisors come into my workshop, they know I've been where they're trying to get to.
Right.
And I've done it. And I'm transparent and I'm direct and I care, but I'm not some author that in theory has come up with a formula, but I never did it. I'm not some home office employee. I'm an actual advisor that performed at a very high level. And there's very few people like me that are now giving back to training.
No, it's very powerful to have that experience, the war stories, that credibility to be able to sit there and distinguish between. I always believe that theory is important. And when you say that there's an art to selling, I would totally agree. And I always used to tell my teams there's also a science to selling, right?
Absolutely.
And I think there's a combination that you can put in, but I think that these only can be put into place because you are inquisitive enough to say, okay, what is the theory? Why should this work? You think about those things, but that you can also have the experience of having tried it and find out it doesn't work that way. and that you have to tweak it on the go. So I think that element of theory and practice, I think, is very critical for somebody who is in the field. But I also think, to your point, for somebody who's providing speaking or consulting or like sales training, as you're talking about.
No question. No question.
Now, despite the fact that we're in this new technology world with AI and everything else, prospecting remains one of the biggest challenges for financial advisors, especially newer ones who might fear or dislike the idea of cold calling from you, or even being called a salesperson, as we've talked about. From your training experience, what mindset shifts and practical systems do you teach to help advisors become confident, consistent prospectors?
Well, first of all, let's use this as a perfect example to bring mindset to life in a very tactical way. One of the mindsets that I try to really work on with almost every one of my advisors that first come to me in my workshop is, if I'm an advisor and you're my client, okay, whether they realize it consciously or not, it's either their big time or at least a chunk of it, none of which is healthy. And that is that if I'm going to ask you for referrals, if I'm going to ask you for favorable introductions, that I'm going to kind of say, please, would you be willing to help me? I'm going to say like, hey, I promise I'm not going to offend your friends and family. I'm going to say things not directly, but hey, I know you probably don't like to do this, but I sure could use the favor. I sure could use the help. They're coming from an apologetic perspective of a mindset that they're putting you in an uncomfortable position to ask you to do something that you don't really want to do for their benefit so they can grow their business, so they can make money. Right, that's a very, very, very debilitating mindset. My mindset that I teach and my mindset that I had was, and this is not, you could never say this verbally because it would be egotistical and cocky and a huge turnoff. But I'm giving you the articulated version of what's going on in my head. If I'm the advisor and I'm working with you, it's like, Sam, I'm really, 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 really good at what I do. And you're lucky to have me. And the reality is, I also really, really, really care. And I take a huge onus of responsibility when I work with you to do whatever is in your best interest for your goals. And I take the time to understand it. And at the end of the day, I'm going to change your life. The biggest fear of people is money. People worry about money, and it's not having too much of it. Okay. It's a huge, huge, huge problem, especially in America, because it's such a consumptive society. And what I'm going to do by working with you for decades is I'm going to take that fear away, and I'm going to deliver financial security and serenity, and you're going to love it. And you're going to be so glad that you worked with me. So much so that if you've ever met anybody that's happily married that got introduced to their spouse on a blind date, they remember who introduced them for the rest of their life. And I'm also successful, Sam. So I'm sure you probably got 30, 40, 50 friends and family members that you'd love for me to work with, that I can help the same way I've helped you, but I'm busy. I don't have time for that. So what I really want you to do is think hard, and let's just start with 3. Who are the sharpest 3 that you care about the most, that I can go change their life over time the same way I'm going to be able to change yours? Now that's a dramatically different mindset. And that is not something that I teach to manipulate the mind, because the brain is too powerful. You can't manipulate it.
Yep.
If you don't authentically really believe that and really feel that, you can't behave that way. And when I said to you earlier, your beliefs drive your behaviors, what I just role played inside my head, that's as authentic as the day is long. I did not make that up. That's exactly how I felt as an advisor. Like,
to your point, I think that mindset that you're talking about is come, again, as we talked about earlier, through the efforts that you put in building your competence, building your confidence, etc. And so when you're making that kind of a statement to a client or a potential client, you can back it up by, here's here is what I've done for you. Here is how I've added value for you. Here's how I've added value for 10 other clients in similar positions. This is why you should feel very comfortable in recommending me to 3 of your friends, et cetera, right? So to your point, it's a very, very different mindset saying from doing me, please do me a favor, to saying, let me do you a favor and let me do your friends a favor like I've done for you.
Yeah. And when I say that in training, Sam, this is a big challenge for human beings. Forget about the industry. It's very common for a young man or woman, 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the business. When I say what I just said to you, say, well, yeah, of course you have that, Jim. You're 58 years old. You've been in the industry for 36 years.
Right.
I'm 26. I've only been in the business 2 years. I don't have that mindset. And that's debilitating too, because the mindset doesn't have to be empowered by investment returns and results or delivering a death claim or delivering a disability claim that you will occur over a lifelong career in this industry. But it's immensely valuable, immensely, just to take an initial fact. Most people don't take time out of their life and have a relationship with a financial advisor that really takes time to ask them methodical questions about what's important to them, what keeps them up at night, what are their goals, what are they doing, what are they afraid about, those kinds of, just that interview alone after meeting somebody for an hour is immensely valuable. They're not all going to buy from you, but that's a value. You don't have to sell them something before you're worthy of asking.
No, that's a great point. That even somebody that is new, relatively new, and doesn't have that experience that you have, I think to be able to walk in and be genuinely interested in the other person, actively listening, asking them questions, etc. I think it's unique. It makes a difference, and clients, like anybody else, want to feel heard and understood. And I would suspect that one leads to the other. If you can be informed, engaged, and challenge and ask your potential clients those questions, you will get those stories and that successes that you can point to quicker than the otherwise, right? It won't take you 30 years to be able to go and say, okay, here's what I've been able to do for my clients.
Yeah. And once again, there's an art to that,
And intentional effort, right? Let me ask you the last question. So, looking at the evolution of the financial services industry over your 30 plus year career, what fundamental sales and relationship building principles do you believe remain timeless? And what has had to adapt to meet today's client expectations?
Well, that's a very, 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 not that your rest of the questions haven't been good. They've all been good. But this is an exceptionally good question for me because a lot of times my friends who aren't in the industry, who know what I do, who know I'm 58, ask me at some point in time, are you concerned that you're going to become archaic? Are you going to get outdated?
Right.
The next generation of 20 and 30-year-olds not going to be able to relate to you at some point in time because the industry has evolved so much. Technology has evolved. You're old school. You're outdated. It's like watching black and white TV. And it's kind of what you said in your question. And my answer has been absolutely not, because the things that I put my hat on that are my subject expertise, things that I pride myself by, that I put it on the line every day, are timeless. Okay. So there's been an enormous amount of change in the financial industry, from products to the integration of investments and wealth management, to technology, to even underwriting. And a lot of things have changed.
Right.
But there are things that haven't changed. In a relationship with another human being, how do you build implicit trust? How do you get people, how do you behave to demonstrate for people to walk away to know that you genuinely care about them? How do you become great at asking questions, talking way less, and becoming a world-class listener? How do you get people to feel as if you genuinely have their back? And so, how do you get people comfortable introducing you to other people that they care about, i.e., getting referrals?
Right.
How do you master the art of getting, the biggest enemy advisors have with people and clients is them procrastinating? How do you help people avoid procrastination and take action on things they need to take action on? All those things were important in 1920s. They're important in 2025, and they'll be important in 2225. A lot of the other things have changed dramatically. And I don't get involved in those. I don't get involved in product recommendation. I don't get involved in a lot of different things. But those human elements, because at the end of the day, I think you can really say a financial advisor is not in the insurance business. It's not the wealth management business. It's not in the planning business. They are in the managing of human behavior business.
It's funny that you say that. So my background is behavioral science, and one of the things that fascinates me and that echoes what you've said is that human DNA has not dramatically changed in the last 2,000 years. Our hopes, fears, all of the drives, everything that we've had are fundamentally the same. The way that we exercise them may be different. That you want the latest iPhone or the latest electric vehicle, that may be different than what we might have wanted, our grandparents might have wanted. But the drives for things and the way that we interact with people, the trust that we want in our interactions, I think you're absolutely right. These behaviors haven't changed, and learning how to interact and manage and deal with that human behavior is timeless in whatever field that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think you articulated it better than I did.
No, I disagree. But anyhow, we're coming to the end of our podcast, Jim. So I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you that I ask all of my guests. So when you're ready, number one, professionally, what is the most important lesson you've learned over the years?
Beliefs drive behaviors.
Love it. I totally agree. Number two, what is one practical tip you would offer listeners keen on applying your insights?
Constantly seek out to be uncomfortable, to tap into your potential. Don't run from it, embrace it.
I like that. Jim, this has been a very enjoyable and informative discussion. If listeners want to learn more about you or P2P Group, where should they go?
Well, real simple, jimeffner.com is our free website, and you can learn a lot about our programs and all that kind of stuff. And then our subscription website is p2p-academy.com. And that's where I put about 4 years of my life filming short films, anywhere from 2 to 7 or 8 minutes each, on every single thing that has anything to do with the financial advisory space. There's over 300 videos on there, all the way from mindset, beliefs, phoning, fact finding, selling, all that kind of stuff. And it's a great resource laboratory, especially for advisors out there that live in a lonely world, but don't really have a culture or an organization or a mentor or a coach to give them all those resources. You can get it online at P2P.
Awesome. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today on the Future Ready Advisor.
Thank you for having me, Sam. Best of luck to you.
You as well. In this episode of the Uncertainty Edge podcast, I spoke with Jim Effner. Jim brings over 30 years of building one of Northwestern Mutual's largest offices and now dedicates himself to helping financial advisors close the gap between their potential and their performance. Here are my 3 key takeaways. Number 1, the 3 C's plus conviction. Jim's formula is deceptively simple but profoundly powerful. Competence leads to confidence, which builds courage, all wrapped in deep conviction. You can't fake competence, and you can't sustain confidence without mastering your craft. But here's what separates good from great. Conviction transforms opinions into unshakable beliefs that drive behavior. When you genuinely believe in the value you deliver, not as theory, but as lived truth, you stop apologizing for prospecting and start operating from a place of service. That mindset shift changes everything. Number 2, environment isn't luck, it's strategy. Jim was candid. His first break was pure luck, but everything after that, intentional design. He deliberately moved into neighborhoods that stretched him, joined clubs where he was the youngest member, and surrounded himself with people operating at levels he aspired to reach. This wasn't about keeping up with the Joneses. It was about refusing to settle. Your environment either pulls you up or lets you plateau. Financial advisors who architect their surroundings, who they learn from, who they compete with, what they consume, create the urgency that mediocrity never will. Number 3, timeless principles trump trendy tactics. In an industry obsessed with technology, products, and platforms, Jim anchors himself in what never changes: building trust, asking better questions, listening deeply, and helping people overcome procrastination. These human skills, managing behavior, not just money, remain as valuable today as they were in 1920 and will be in 2220. The advisors who master these fundamentals don't fear obsolescence. They recognize that while delivery mechanisms evolve, the core of exceptional advisory work remains unchanged: genuine care, radical clarity, and the courage to challenge clients toward their best future. Jim reminds us that the gap between potential and performance isn't closed by hoping, it's bridged by intentional effort, uncomfortable growth, and an unshakable belief in the value you bring. Advisors who embrace that truth, they're the ones building practices and lives that matter. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Uncertainty Edge. If today's conversation sparked something, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You'll get practical tools, deeper insights, and new episodes every other Tuesday. Please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also subscribe to the newsletter at theuncertaintyedge.com for more insights. When certainty isn't coming, your edge is knowing how you move forward anyways.